Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. We're excited to be back with a brand new series featuring critical core skills that will help you gain greater traction in your career development. Well, we'll be having 2 sessions per week for this month of July, so please stay tuned. With that in mind, we shall begin. Welcome and a very good afternoon to you. We are now having Learn Over Lunch at LLI Brownback series brought to you by Headhunt in partnership with Lifelong Learning Institute. My name is Tammy. Broadcasting live here in LLI, we have with us Assistant Professor Walid Jumblatt from School of Social Sciences, NTU, and he'll be sharing with us on the critical core skill of collaboration. His topic will be Social Intelligence, a Lost Art. Now, before I hand over the time to him, please note that there is a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Please feel free to type in your questions at any time during the presentation. We'll also be conducting our feedback poll right at the end. Now, without further ado, I'll now pass the time to Walid. Walid, over to you.
Thank you so much, Tammy. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. And my name is Walid, and I am an assistant professor at NTU Social Sciences. And I am actually a political scientist. So I study social movements and religion in Southeast Asia, Singapore, Malaysia, especially. Today, I'll be talking about social intelligence. So even though I'm not a psychologist, I will be drawing a lot on theories and works that have been done by my colleagues in psychology, here and throughout the world. And the thing about studying social movements is you need to understand the psychology of individuals as well. And political psychology is a huge part of it. So even though I'm not a psychologist, I do dabble into it. But what I am talking about today, social intelligence, I hope it's something that all of us can relate to. Especially it's so important today, right? With the increase of digitalization and adoption of technology at the workplace. I think it's important to take stock of our own skills, especially what are some of these soft skills that are needed in this digital era. And I think many of these soft skills are regarded now as critical core skills, right? And there are 16 soft skills under critical core skills that can be picked up and applied across all industries. But today I will be talking about collaboration, specifically social intelligence, right? Creating synergies, building effective relationships. But is this a lost art today? And I would argue yes, for various reasons. And I'll talk about what social intelligence is, why I think it is a lost art, what are the reasons and what are the implications of that, and hopefully what we can do about it. So let me walk you through it. So as I said, there are 4 parts to my presentation. So I'll be talking about the definition, the importance, the reasons for the decline in social intelligence, the societal implications, and that I'm really drawing on my own work. And moving ahead, what do we do? And also I am discussing this from the perspective as someone who does research on this, but also as an educator, someone who sees young people on a daily basis, and as a father as well, and what I see in my own life, and hopefully all of this can be applied to yours as well, right? So before we begin, I have 3 pictures here, right, of statistics, of trends that we all should find worrying, right? And I want to be a little alarmist here, right? So the first one, all of these are in the States, but it's applicable here as well, maybe not to the same extent, but it will be applicable to the same extent pretty soon. So the first one, people in the US have fewer close friends than 30 years ago, according to the Survey Center on American Life. And just 13% of US adults say they have 10 or more close friends, compared with 33% of those surveyed in 1990. Now, having 10 close friends is not a problem, right? You just need 5 close friends in life, right? But that's not the point. The point is there has been a sharp decrease in number of close friends. And I think there are serious societal implications for this in terms of loneliness, rates of depression, and so on, that we will discuss later on. Another one, young people do not know how to talk to each other anymore. This is, I think, a lot of us who interact with young people will know anecdotally that this is true, but the data supports this as well. And I think something which is not often talked about, which I think has profound societal implications, which I will expound later. 6 out of 10 young men are single, the disturbing reasons why. And this is from February 2023, so just a few months ago. And I have also been reading statistics in the US. And again, because of the lack of social interactions exacerbated by the pandemic, of course, but this started way before the pandemic. The way people get into relationships a lot of times today is through dating apps. And on dating apps in the States, 80% of men, 80% of women swipe right on 20% of men. That means 80% of men go unnoticed on dating apps. Now, we seriously have to think about what are the implications of this for society at large. So I'm really setting this up. I'm really setting my talk up to show that there is, I would say, a crisis in social relations, social intelligence, right? So I think in the literature, it is established, well established, and all of us working adults will know that this is also true in our daily lives, right? That people with higher social intelligence make better leaders and are more successful in the workplace. I think this is common knowledge. And I'm just putting the Harvard Business Review there to show that this common knowledge is supported by data. But what exactly is social intelligence? On the most basic level, basically, it just means the ability to relate to and connect with others, right? A more academic definition would say that is the ability to get along with people in general, social technique or ease in society, knowledge of social matters, susceptibility to stimuli from other members of a group, as well as insight into the temporary moods or underlying personality traits of strangers. So let's unpack that a little. The ability to get along with people in general, that's quite straightforward in terms of understanding it, but it's not straightforward in terms of practicing it. Right? Social technique or ease in society, knowledge of social matters. And here, we need to understand that a little bit of cultural intelligence is needed as well. And by cultural intelligence, I do not just mean cultures in terms of, the Malay culture, the Indian culture, the Chinese culture. There's that. And that's important as well, especially in a multiracial workplace, multiracial country like Singapore, but also other parts of culture, right? For those of us who have been to different workplaces, you know that every workplace has its own cultures. Every department within the workplace has its own culture, right? And understanding that is extremely important, right? So susceptibility to stimuli from other members of a group, right? Understanding what makes other people tick. And a lot of times these forms of communication are non-verbal. It doesn't need to be said, but it needs to be understood, as well as into the temporary moods or underlying personality traits of strangers, understanding how our colleagues, what are their red lines or what gets them off and so on, right? And these are extremely important traits for people who are going to succeed in the workplace, right? Social intelligence broadly defined. And to just delve a little bit more detail, there are two facets to social intelligence. One is social awareness, and there are some facets to this, and the other is social facility. Now, I just wanted to make a note that often emotional intelligence and social intelligence are used interchangeably, and they are related, no doubt, but they are different conceptually. So emotional intelligence is more of an intrapersonal thing. It's how you cope with your own emotions. Whereas social intelligence is interpersonal. It's about how you relate to your social surroundings. And today I'll be talking about social intelligence. But of course, as I said, both are interrelated. Right? So the first facet, social awareness, and there are four features to this. One is primal empathy, right? So this is the ability to sense someone's feelings. And this is, of course, based on a lot of times people do not tell others how they feel. So this is based on facial expressions, is based on intonation, and is based on general body language. These are not scientific things per se, right? You cannot measure them in a lab. Or maybe you can with great care and caution, right? But it's something that we need to have and understand as well, right? So attunement, the second one, is basically listening to someone properly. And this is something that all of us can easily work on if we wanted to, right? And I'll share some things about this as well. Third one, more difficult, empathic accuracy. It's understanding another's feelings and intentions. Because the difficulty is feelings are internal. We all know that intentions are internal. A lot of times people want to be understood without explicitly saying whatever they feel. And we need to be able to pick on that. And the final one is social cognition, right? Understanding how the social world works. And this, as I said, the cultural intelligence is extremely important. Understanding our own workplace, understanding the cultures of people, the backgrounds of other people. People who come from different cultural backgrounds may view different things differently. Or, sorry, people who come from different cultural backgrounds may view the same thing differently. People who come from different socio-economic status, they may view things differently, the same thing differently. And this is something that we really need to understand. And in Singapore, I think a lot of us pay a lot of attention to race and religion and diversity in that aspect. And I think, of course, things can be improved in that sense. But generally, we all have an understanding of how important it is to understand racial, religious diversity. But we must understand that's not the only part of a person's background. Socioeconomic status is another important one. Understanding that is crucial. I think we do not pay enough attention to that. Now, the next one, the second facet, would be social facility. Again, there are four features. The first would be synchrony, and this is where you interact with others non-verbally. I've also seen this study about how parents validate children. There was this one study. And what are the different ways of validating, right? So the first one, when a child does something and then nothing is said, nothing is said. So obviously it's less, the outcome is less positive for the child's development. The second one, the parent says, good job, buddy. Good job, buddy. And you can see higher levels of motivation the next time the child does a task and so on. The final one, a tap on the back. This is the second last one, a pat on the back. And you see, this is even more effective than good job, buddy. And the last one, the parent just puts out the hand for a high five, right? And this is the highest level of validation. And when I read this study, this is extremely interesting because we always talk about positive words of affirmation in this day and age, right? But it's also about positive non-verbal cues of affirmation, right? A pat on the back matters a lot. I can share something maybe a bit more personal, right? When in the past couple of years, I've experienced a few deaths of close ones, and during those times, right, I still remember everybody who turned up for my father's funeral. I still remember every one of my friends who turned up. I still remember every single one who sent me messages. I still remember those who gave me hugs and pats during that time. And I will never ever forget them, right? This interaction, this synchrony, right, is so underrated. It's so easy to do. It's so underrated, right? When somebody does something good at work, don't just give a pat on the back, something. So self-presentation, right? So people who say how you look doesn't matter, I mean, that's not true. How you present yourself is reflective of, first of all, how much you care about that particular event, right? And second of all, it's also a projection of confidence as well. The third would be influence, and this is about shaping the outcome of social interaction. And you can think about this in terms of steering the conversation, especially when people show a little bit of discomfort. Right? How are you going to react to that, right? So you need to be able to shape the outcome of social interactions. And I want all of us to think of the best leaders we have had. The best leaders we have had, most of the time, they are the best leaders we've had, not just because they're intelligent. I mean, that's a given, I think, but also because they make us feel good about ourselves. And it's because of their ability to steer the conversations. when we are uncomfortable, for instance. And sometimes, not sometimes, a lot of times in the workplace, a lot of uncomfortable things need to be said and hashed out and trashed and discussed and so on. And that's fine. That's part of the working world. We won't have it. Not everybody gets a gold medal, right, in the working world, nor should they even get a gold medal in school. But the point is, it's how you steer conversations when people are uncomfortable. So someone said to me long ago, said that you can always make a difficult point without being a difficult person, right? And that's social intelligence, right? And of course, the final one is concern, caring about others' needs, and there are actual practical ways that we can show concern, right? And I will try to talk about this at the end. So that's really just the definition, right? So what are the reasons for this decline in social intelligence? I started off with the three pictures, the data to show that there is indeed a decline in social intelligence, social relationships, or just relationships in general and how we interact with the social world. What are the reasons? And the first one, obviously, the most obvious one is technology, right? And there is no way getting around it, right? The more time we spend on social media websites, the more time we spend on our devices, often mindless scrolling, the less time we spend on people, right? The less time we invest in relationships. And I use that term pretty deliberately, investing in relationships. And I'll get to that at the end as well. Lower in-person interaction. And if this is true of us, people who are slightly older, right? What about those who grew up entirely on social media? And you just take a look at the social skills of teenagers nowadays, compare that to social skills of teenagers back in the day, right? And this is not a function of their generation. It's not about our generation being better than theirs. If our generation had the same travails of technology, it would be the same for us as well. It's really a technological advancement, right? So in the past, during the free time, all teenagers wanted to do was go down, or most teenagers wanted to go down, play with their friends, right? Now, sometimes you have to force teenagers to go down, right? To get off their apps and their devices, their gadgets. Right? And there are transformative effects on behavior. It's not just a leisurely or a pastime thing. There are actual transformative effects on behavior, right? The social media usage, and by even Facebook's own data, which they were reluctant to release, but Facebook's own data or Meta's own data shows that higher usage of social media is not good for a teenager's mental health across genders, boys and girls, but especially for girls. Right? So it's not good for both, but it's worse for girls, right? And we can completely understand why. Because social media projects a fake version of people's lives. Right? The best versions, and is the best fake version sometimes, of a person's life, yet people cannot help but be affected by this envy that is caused by social media. So it's not good for social interactions, it's not good for mental health, right? So according to the data, we have an average Singaporean spends 2 hours 31 minutes on social media site, and this is this year, the data from this year. To be honest, when I saw this, I said, oh, that's pretty low actually. I expected far more. I mean, it's high, but I expected in my mind it would be higher than this. But then this is the average Singaporean. So we could reasonably surmise that the younger you are, the higher this number would be, because it's across all age groups, right? Now, what is the transformative effect I was talking about? Now, Professor Adam Alter, a psychologist from New York University, right? He actually identifies the physiological, the biological effects of this, right? And he actually likens social media to drug and alcohol usage and smoking. The minute you take a drug, I'm quoting, the minute you take a drug, drink alcohol, smoke a cigarette, if those are your poison, when you get a social media, like on social media, all of those experiences produce dopamine, which is a chemical that's associated with pleasure. So when someone likes an Instagram post or any content you share, it's a little bit like taking a drug. as far as your brain is concerned, it's a very similar experience. Right? And just think about this, when I started dabbling into this, and then and I'm a heavy social media user myself, I started thinking, yeah, it makes sense. Why we refresh to see what are the number of likes and views and shares that we get, right? There is this element to it where it becomes an addiction, right? If it becomes an addiction, first of all, as I said, there are mental health issues associated with this, higher rates of depression and anxiety in younger people, and therefore that reduces social interaction, but also just spending more time on it means there's less time for in-person interaction. And the problem is not going to get better. It's just going to get worse and worse. You will see that more and more people will have less social relations, fewer social relationships, less in-person interaction, and therefore levels of social intelligence are just going to be on the decline. So I think what we are doing recording this live stream today, I think 10 years from now, this is still going to be relevant, unfortunately, right? Because it's just going to be more tech, more social media platforms. Now there's threads on Instagram. I haven't downloaded. I almost downloaded, but I realized, oh my God, I already spent so much time, more than 2 hours, 31 minutes on social media. I don't need to be spending more time. I probably am going to cave and download any, right? So this problem is going to be more acute. So the next one, technology is I think a given already. Now, the other one is, I think, is sort of a reality check for me as well, right? The overprotection of children, and of course, children don't remain children, right? They become adults, and therefore all these things matter in the workplace. So today, in 2023, we let kids practice independence at a much later stage in life, right? And I think society has made young people more fragile. For a few reasons. Structural shifts, societal shifts have caused this mainly. For one, people have fewer children, so the tendency is to be more protective in the past. And I know even this is true even on a basic level, right? So when I asked my 6-year-old, he's 8 years old now, and my son was 6 years old, I asked him to go to the shop, which is very near, and it's all sheltered, so no exposure to rain or anything, by himself. And my mom was there, and my mom started scolding me, right? My mom, who used to ask me to go on my own, right, to the shop, right? She started saying, although that may be a grandparenting more than anything else, but also we let kids practice independence at a much later stage in life, right? Whereas at 8 years old in the past, like in the very, very distant past, right? It was very common for them to go out, I even read this psychologist who was saying, Jonathan Haidt, he was saying in the past, people were making rafts and going down the river at 8 or 9 years old, right? Now everywhere, we don't even let them take the public transport at 8. So there are structural shifts that have caused us to be more protective of children. And the long-term effect is when people grow up, they expect parents or government or people in authority to protect them more than previously, like human beings in the past, right? And what this does is it reduces their propensity to solve conflicts on their own, right? And Jonathan Haidt, who's also a psychologist, he said, when we protect children from unpleasantness, from conflicts, from insults, from teasing, from exclusion, we are setting them up to be weak, to be more easily damaged, to be more easily discouraged. Now, and one of the things that I'm trying to figure out also, parenting is always about fine lines, right? It's always about fine lines. On one hand, too much unpleasantness will damage a child, too much teasing will, too much exclusion will. On the other hand, no teasing, no exclusion, and that's not good for them as well. They are not able to navigate social relationships easily. So what is that line? And I don't have that answer. I'm just trying to point out that this is something we seriously need to think about. We cannot protect children from every single difficulty, right? So that's something for us to think about. And the third one I would say is an overemphasis on meritocracy sometimes. Again, there is a fine line here, and I'll talk about what the fine line is. Remember, a crucial part of social intelligence, which I emphasized just now, was empathy, right? Empathy for others, right? And if we start buying into this meritocratic myth, as I would call it, right? It can lead to a lack of empathy for the situations of others, right? Because you may think that, oh, you are where you are not at my level because you didn't work as hard as I did, right? That's why you are some lowly person in my organization, right? Whereas I really work hard throughout my life, right? When we do not account for class or structural advantages, familial advantages that we may have had throughout our lives. So an overemphasis on meritocracy may lead to a lack of empathy. It may lead to some class snobbery. But again, there is a fine line here, right? Because on one hand, you do not want to not emphasize meritocracy, right? Because you don't want to tell people that, oh, if you come from a certain socioeconomic status, then you're doomed for life, right? So you don't want to take the element of wanting to strive and work hard, right? On the other, you also need to acknowledge social advantages that people, what Ben Bernanke calls the former chief economist in the States, he called this inherited meritocracy, right? So there is that element as well. So it's about striking that balance, right? So because we don't want a person to feel victimized to the point of self-defeatism, and that doesn't do any good for anyone. But we must be sure to create an environment which encourages empathy by discussing social conditions honestly. And I think a lack of empathy in the workplace, in life, in social settings, a lot of times can be attributed to an overemphasis on meritocracy. Okay? Right, okay. So what are the broader societal implications of this? And I think a lack of social intelligence or declined social intelligence has ramifications at the workplace, individual level, but also at the broad societal level, right? And that's something I study a lot. And I would say one of the biggest challenges of our time, I would say maybe three, if you were to ask me to name 3 or 4 biggest challenges facing humanity, I would say climate change is one, inequality is another, and I would say societal polarization, societal and political polarization. This would be my top 3. And societal polarization, political polarization has a lot to do with the decline of social relationships, social intelligence, right? The more people retreat, the less people interact with each other, the more we retreat into our own intellectual bubbles, right? And this is the nature of social media algorithm. You are exposed to things which you believe. And the more you like something, the more it will appear on your feed. So you may come to the conclusion that most of society think like you. And this is so common. A lot of times this happens, right? A lot of times when you see people going up to a questionnaire and asking a question, when the answer would be super obvious, then the person is shocked by the answer because that person has not been exposed to these answers because they are all in their intellectual bubbles, right? And this is not good for the health of a functioning society, right? Because society will be more polarized. And that is the effect of technology and social media. As I said, I think this is one of the biggest challenges of our time. And for sure, I think second one, higher levels of mental health problems. I think this is well established as well. Depression, anxiety, loneliness. There are serious repercussions to this social intelligence decline. And the third one that I want to also talk about, deteriorating gender relations between men and women. Now, this hasn't really taken off in Singapore, and thankfully, but my worry is that it will, as it has in the States. I don't know how many people are familiar with what is called the red pill movement, right? So the red pill basically is because of the matrix, right? Red pill and blue pill, but basically is the anti-feminist movement, or they call themselves men's rights or whatever it is. This movement in the West, right? That bills itself as a counter to feminism, right? Rectifying the ills of feminism, they say. And it's personified in personalities like Andrew Tate, for instance. Now, a lot of times, and I wasn't really exposed to the red pill movement until recently, and when I started listening to them, and I think if the more young men listen to the red pill movement, the more dangerous it is for gender relations and society. I think the red pill movement, they identify a lot of problems that men are facing, but the solutions they give are terrible. What has that got to do with this talk? The reason why the red pill movement is so attractive to young men is precisely because of the stat I mentioned earlier, the 80% and 20%, 80% of men do not get dates, they do not get that. So they look to these heroes, these idols, right? These false idols, right? For redemption. And it's very dangerous. And I think a lot of that has to do with the decline of relationships, just because people do not interact with each other anymore. So their chances of dating would be through apps. And we know then it becomes more material on apps, right? It becomes more about your social status, your looks, and your height, and not really about your personality anymore, because apps are not designed to be able to assess a person's personality, dating apps. And there are serious societal repercussions for this, which I think we have not grappled with. Right? But I think those are three major problems that I can identify. There are definitely more, but these are three huge ones, I think, right? So moving ahead, like on a practical level, right? What can we do, right? What can we do? And for me, like the first one, which is what I mentioned earlier, and under this, there would be a lot of things that we can do, is investing in relationship. And when I use the term, as I said, quite deliberately, we invest because this is not something that comes out of nowhere. It is something that requires a lot of work, right? Work on the interpersonal, right? How we interact with others, right? And it can be something extremely simple, right? When we are talking to people along the walkway in our workplaces, right? Stop and ask them, how are you, right? Or how was your weekend? Instead of walking past by, how are you? Like that's the most insincere, how are you, right? When both of you are walking past by each other, right? All of us are guilty of it. But that's why, that's the investment part, like investing time into relationships. And I don't think we do it as much as we should. Right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I think we need to show that we care. And one of the simple techniques that I also use, right? When people talk to me, when they tell me about something, I try to ask them questions based on what they say, right? And it really goes a long way to show that you are actually listening and you are caring, because you are able to engage with them based on what they say, right? Rather than platitudes, oh, that's nice, right? And listen attentively. And it's a pet peeve of mine, right? When you're talking to somebody and that person is on their phone, although I am guilty of it as well sometimes. So we need to again pay attention to people and relationships, right? And look for non-verbal clues. This is what psychologists say. Look for non-verbal clues. Facial expressions always, not always, often give a lot away. Intonation give a lot away. Body language give a lot away. Now, again, because this is not an exact science, this is something that we get better at as we practice, right? As we invest more time into the interpersonal. No, and I think even though the solutions seem micro, I think there will be long-term societal implications, both at the workplace, but also at the larger society, right? If people are able to invest more in this. And the second one, to counter societal polarization, right? Now, we always will disagree with anybody, right? If I said to people before that if I only discuss things with people whom I agree with 100% of the time, then I will only be discussing with myself. And even then, on some days, I probably won't talk to myself because even your own opinions evolve over time, right? So we must have a lot of these debates that polarize society, right? Are debates that need to be had. I'm not saying that don't debate. That's also not a way to run a functioning society. You need to have these discussions, right? These difficult discussions on race, on politics, on inequality, right? But as much as you have them on social media, have them in person as well, right? Because the tone, the decorum that we have when we discuss and debate things with people in person is much, much higher than when on social media. It seems like there's no ethics to the debate, right? Like the sky is the limit, right? But half the things that we say online to each other, we'll never say to somebody in person, right? And I am a huge fan of actually having more discussions in person, right? And the philosophy I myself have, right? Or I try to practice at least is that when I have a position, I believe that I'm right. Otherwise, why do I hold that position if I don't believe it? I'm right, right? But I must be open to the possibility that I am wrong. And I think this seems like a simple principle. I got this from Ash-Shafi'i. He's a classical Islamic scholar. But I hold on to this philosophy. I try to live by it because I think that would make us better people in terms of communicating with others. It could make us more empathetic in terms of trying to understand where other people are coming from. And even if you do not come to an agreement, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you don't come to an agreement. At least you have a better understanding of how other people feel. So my two, moving ahead, the two solutions, right? One is really at the personal level that all of us can do tomorrow. The other is more at the personal level, but involves the societal level as well, right? So hopefully this is quite in-depth in terms of, I do not just want to be alarmist, raise the problems, and without saying practically what we can do based on what psychologists have said, based on my own research as well, right? So that's what I have for this segment itself, but I allow me to share some things on my own school, right? So because I wanted to take this time to share what we, Triple S, School of Social Sciences at NTU, have to offer. We offer graduate programs through coursework and research. And we try, the idea of social sciences is we discuss these things, these societal issues, these soft skills, and that is really the bread and butter of what we do. And we also have the continuing education program, right? The CE program, where we coordinate between Skills Future Singapore, MOE, and various NTU entities, right? And you can see we have a few graduate programs, Masters in Applied Economics, Masters in Applied Gerontology, which is extremely popular nowadays because of Singapore's aging population. And we have our Flexi Masters programs, which will start in August and September. You can look up for more information on the dates on our website, our social media platforms. So some of the things that we do, qualitative interviewing, and qualitative meaning in terms of how we, so the qualitative and quantitative, right? Quantitative is about the data, the numbers, the hard numbers. Qualitative methods would be about interviews, semi-structured interviews, how to conduct interviews, what are the ethics of interviews, how are the questions you're supposed to design them in order to get the best results, right? So there is a science behind it as well. And research methods for aging, as I said, mental health and aging. So these two are going to be extremely, extremely important, right? And just now I talked about mental health of younger people, right? And people who are immersed in social media. Mental health for those, and I think many of us do have parents or aunties and uncles who are aging, who are older. We know that mental health is a huge problem, especially once their partners pass on, right? And this is something, I mean, as I said, my own dad passed on a couple of years ago, and the death of a person's partner has serious physical and mental health effects on the part, right? And we all know why as well. And traditional Chinese medicine for older adults, and this is something that I think I'm quite proud to say that NTU has. So we complement Western medicine with traditional Chinese medicine. 5,000 years of civilization, surely the Chinese have something to offer us in terms of medicine. And I myself am a huge believer in TCM, traditional Chinese medicine. And we talk about aging and the end of life. For that person, for the caregiver especially, right? Caregiver stress is a real issue. But also the methods that caregivers can take on, what are the strategies, how do you understand aging, and so on. And we all do this through very data-driven methods and studies, introducing the social sciences into all of these practical issues. So you can follow us on our socials, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, of course. We don't have TikTok yet, but I don't think this is the crowd for TikTok, but we will be having TikTok soon as well. So thank you so much. And I think I should take the questions now. And there are a few questions already I see. Feel free to type them in the Q&A. So the first one is, can you kindly specify what age group is young people? Yeah, so this is a good question, right? So depending on whether you use NYC's definition of youth, right? So 35 years and below, right? But what I am saying today is relevant across the board, The perils of technology affect older people as well. It's about the more time you use on social media. However, the problem is accentuated for people who grew up with social media. And you can think they are now in their 20s or those in their teenage years now. So the Gen Z people, and maybe the tail end of the millennials as well. Because those are your formative years. And when you are exposed to social media, I mean, teenagers since forever have always struggled with body image issues, for instance. But it was much harder to see perfect bodies last time, right? In magazines or in TV. But now you're inundated with that. Obviously, you're going to struggle with these issues more. So young people. So I don't want to say that this is just for young people. It's throughout, but the problems will be more acute for people who grew up with social media, especially the Gen Z. But as I said, all of us are susceptible to it as well. So hopefully that answers the question. So how to exercise self-control to stop social media addiction? I wish I knew. I'm an addict myself, but sometimes on the days that I'm pretty disciplined, I time the amount of hours or minutes I spend on this particular app. Right? So I know some of my students do it as well, but I remember this student of mine telling me, "Oh, I'm quite disciplined. I limit myself to 1 hour per app." 1 hour per app. So if you have 4 apps, that's 4 hours, right? So that's something that we can do as well. And also one of the things we must know why we use social media, right? What exactly that we are looking for. I think for me, especially in my work, I have to use social media, to look at societal, political trends. But also a lot of times I use that as an excuse, right? To spend more time than I need to, right? So we must be aware of why we are doing it. And the moment we catch ourselves doing it the moment we start just scrolling aimlessly, that's when we need to stop, right? When there is no purpose to the scrolling already, right? So I don't think that was a really good answer, but that's the best I could do for that. As I said, I myself am guilty about that. So would we consider that Donald Trump supporters are in their intellectual bubbles created by their leader? Now, this is not a left-right thing. This is not a Republican thing. Are Republicans in their social media bubbles? Yes. Are Democrats in their social media bubbles? Yes, they are as well. Right? And I have seen so many of these bubbles. I can really name them off. Like you can say that CNN viewers are in their own bubbles. MSNBC viewers are in their own bubbles. Now, the fact that the left didn't even expect that Donald Trump could win, they were treating him as a joke. That showed how much of a bubble they were in. they were isolated from half of their own country's sentiments, right? So yes, the Republicans are in their own bubbles for sure, 100%, but so were the left. And that problem has just accentuated since 2016, right? And do not be surprised if Donald Trump is going to win the next election as well. Don't be surprised. I wouldn't be shocked. I know a lot of people are laughing again at that possibility. It's not possible, but I would say it's not impossible at all, especially considering studying this and seeing how the rhetoric is on the right. Not that I'm a fan of Donald Trump. I wouldn't have voted for him. I'm just saying that we cannot just dismiss people who support him, right? Especially if we want to build a society that is more empathetic, that's more understanding, less polarized. We have to discuss things and understand even with those that we really disagree with. So any books, good books to read on social intelligence, which you can recommend? Okay, so a lot of these works are academic papers. So I quoted some of them, and somebody asked, I'll be happy to share these slides and we can send to them. But the one person that Jonathan Haidt, Haidt, he wrote The Mollycoddling of the American Mind. And I highly recommend that work. But Jonathan Haidt also does a lot of public speaking, so you can get his stuff on YouTube quite easily. So that book you can get, and that for me explains why people become socially less intelligent and emotionally less secure as well. That's one of the most compelling books that I've read on that. Right, okay, social science and its applications is often seen to be at odds with technological advancements. Do you see any intersection between the two? How tech can help us build better social ties and higher social intelligence? Now, that's an excellent question. It speaks a lot to me because I feel like, especially in a STEM country like Singapore, right, sometimes we are uncritical of new forms of technology. And I feel the job of the social sciences is to rein in technology and really to identify the perils of technology is going to be here. Social media is going to be here. I didn't say none of my solutions were, we need to remove social media. That's impossible. That can never happen, right? But what we need to do is to work around it, identify and be honest about it. Part of the problem why we are not honest about social media, we do not see a lot of like massive discussion. Like now we see a lot of discussion on mental health today. And I think that is a positive thing, right? How often do we hear the issue of mental health being discussed alongside social media? Very rarely, right? And I think one of the reasons is because all of us are so immersed in social media, we find it hard to have an honest critique of it, right? So I think definitely more technology does correlate with this, a lot of these social problems, but that's inevitable. It's going to be here to stay. So the job of the social sciences is to identify these problems and hopefully provide solutions as well. So what can ordinary folks do to mitigate the dangers of the red pill movement? If I know someone who's resentful towards someone now, this is a hard one, right? So when I was first exposed to Andrew Tate, one of the first things that went through my mind is, I hope my son doesn't watch this. And the other thing, I hope my son doesn't learn how to be a man from Andrew Tate. But then it's on me, right? Then it's, if I fail to teach him or guide him to be, how to be a man, then he would look to people like Andrew Tate, right? So one of the things that we need to identify is why are they attracted to this red pill movement and movements like that? And what are the alternatives? If we do not have Andrew Tate, who do we want? This masculine figure that we think is positive, which I think is lacking, that they can identify with without really downplaying their concerns and so on. Right? So I think if you know someone who is resentful towards someone, I think it's really important to have an honest discussion with that person. And I know a couple, by the way, and identify why. And a lot of times, okay, for these two people that I know, it's really because they have problems in the dating scene. And that's the root of their resentment, right? And we need to understand why. We may not agree, but we need to understand why and have honest discussions with them. For the qualitative interviewing model, can we take this as a standalone on itself? Yes, so I would refer you to the website. We have all the criteria for that and which are the modules we can take as standalones, and that is usually available for our Flexi Masters. And we have all the options there, so please do take a look at this. There was a recent article in suicide rates in Singapore. So is the decline in social intelligence part of the reason? Well, maybe not social intelligence directly, but definitely the epidemic of loneliness contributes to it. And don't forget, we also had what was enforced loneliness, which was necessary, but it has its effects as well, the lockdowns, and there were more suicides as well. And incidentally, during the lockdown period, I was playing football with my son at the void deck near my place. So we were just kicking the ball around. So because the street soccers were closed, so it was just an open space. And somebody jumped down right in front of us, like when we were there. And you know, there was a rise in suicide cases during the pandemic as well. And you can expect that if there is, I mean, suicide rates associated with a lot of things, including financial situations as well. But one thing you can expect is that the higher the epidemic of loneliness, or the more pertinent the epidemic of loneliness, the more you will have this. So this social intelligence thing, right, it's not trivial at all. It has serious health implications for society, beyond the workplace as well. So could social intelligence be useful to address the excesses of competitive behavior at work? Unwilling to collaborate? Yes, absolutely, 100%. So again, this one, I would say there must be a fine balance to it. So on one hand, we do want to encourage competition, healthy competition. We want everyone to bring out the best in each other, and that's good. But as we know, a lot of times competition is not healthy. But increasing levels of interpersonal relationships, right? So if you invest in relationships, you are less likely to be resentful towards that person, and that includes that person's achievements, right? So I think definitely there is not even a correlation, there is a direct causation there. So 100%, right? So is the lack of empathy because of overemphasis? So the Flexi Masters, I think I explained, and you can go to the website as well. Sorry, I'm rushing through the questions because there's a lack of time. Is the lack of empathy because of overemphasis on meritocracy a problem that's especially apparent in Singapore? I think it's more apparent in Singapore. It's not exclusive to Singapore, but it's more apparent in Singapore and in other places as well. What steps can be taken to mitigate this? And I think, to be fair to the government, they have started they have carried on the conversation. I would say one of the most pivotal times in Singapore's history was the publication of This Is What Inequality Looks Like by Professor Teo Yo Yan, who is a colleague of mine at NTU. And the public discourse that has been generated since then, since 2018, and the government has been talking about inequality, and therefore you see slogans which I think should be celebrated, like every school is a good school. I know everybody laughs at that, but that's an aspiration, right? What do you want the government to say, right? That the school, not all schools are good schools, right? We don't want that, right? So every school is a good school. It's an aspiration that we hope will become reality. So I think steps to mitigate this would be to emphasize the role of external factors in a person's success. I think that will really help. I think we can do more definitely on that front. How can we show better social skills, especially when communicating with others with different opinions? I think I sort of touched on this in my final slide. I think come in with a position of confidence yet humility, confidence that we are right, at the same time being open, being intellectually humble that we could be wrong. I know even in my adult life, I have changed my opinions on a couple of major issues, like maybe in the past 4 or 5 years, right? Where, you know, your ideas and ideologies are more or less formed before you're 30, right? But even after that, beyond 30, there have been a couple of times that I've really shifted on a few things after discussing more and more. It's not over one conversation, it's numerous conversations that I am sold on a person's ideas and not on, and I started thinking, and maybe my idea was wrong. Shouldn't we start dealing with these issues from earliest? What can we do as parents and teachers? 100%, 100%. So, the mollycoddling part, I think it's something that we all need to do as a society. Parents, teachers, right? So one of the, maybe these people in the audience can disagree, and that's fine, we can disagree. So I am really against the idea that we give gold medals to everybody in kindergarten, sports day, right? I feel like you are not teaching them what life is supposed to be about, even though it comes from a good place, right? The road to hell is paved with good intentions, of course, right? So it can come from a good place. You want to encourage them to take part in sports, but the effect is, for me, what is the value of sports? It's about learning how to lose, right? It's learning how to lose, trying your best, and also know that, okay, sometimes you are not the best at something, but you try harder the next time, right? Improve yourself, right? I think these are simple things which can have an effect on children, right? So the mollycoddling for sure is through, I think, the monitoring of social media for parents, that is essential. I don't know how we can do it, but we need to do it. So definitely a lot of these things start very, very young. And remember, if children, especially teenagers, especially teenage girls, if they do not get validation from their parents, they will seek it elsewhere, right? So it's important for us. It's important for us to develop these sorts of relationships, teachers and parents, with our kids, right? So again, fine lines, right? You don't want to mollycoddle them. You don't want to completely never validate them as well, right? So again, I'm not sure whether I always know where the line is, but I know that we cannot steer one way or the other, right? As a person who knows of a few people who live in their own social bubbles, what are some concrete steps for trying to get them out of their bubbles in an empathetic way, right? So this is an excellent question, right? So I think penetrating the bubbles is extremely crucial, right? And the thing is, this is the value of social intelligence, right? You do not always convince, actually most times you do not convince a person by making a better argument per se. You convince a person by showing that you care first and then making a better argument, right? Without the first part, rarely ever, I would say maybe 5% a person listens to a better argument and think, yeah, I was wrong, right? Without that personal relationship first, right? Only when that personal relationship is developed, then that person will come around to think, oh yeah, that argument is better. And why? Because this person has my interest at heart. This is not a random stranger or a person in my life who doesn't care about me, right? So that is extremely crucial, developing that social intelligence, that social relationship first. So that's why I would say develop that relationship and then argue and debate with them and discuss them, right? Discuss with them. And finally, the degrading of social intelligence is also responsible due to the decline of globalization. This is so, it is an old and young generation. Well, I don't think so. I don't think it's an old and young generation thing per se. As I said, I think it's more acute in younger people because of technological advancements. But now all of us use all sorts of social media platforms, including WhatsApp and YouTube as well, right? Broadly speaking, broadly defining social media. So it can happen to us as well. For sure, this intergenerational divide will happen because there are some issues that younger people will be exposed to, especially more of the Americanized issues that they may, because our pop culture in Singapore, our social media feed, mostly are American, right? So whatever happens in America, it will happen to us as well, or we will be influenced by it as well. So, but again, the older, younger people generational divide is not new. Every older generation, right, finds the younger generation irritating and weak, right? So this is true throughout time. I would say there is something specific today about how social media has transformed people who use it more. So the problem is even more acute. So I really don't want to say that this is about young people not being disciplined and so on. If young people have a problem, it's because older people have not done our job, right? So we must really take this as something introspective and also understand that none of us, we shouldn't be holier than thou. All of us would be susceptible to the same forces of technology if we had gone through teenage years in this era, right? So that's it. Hopefully I've answered the questions really quickly, and I hope you guys benefited from today's session. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Walid, for staying with us, giving us so much information that is beneficial for us, the importance of social intelligence and how to use it in our personal life, work, and in the society. Now, before we proceed to the feedback poll, we would like to give you an update on the services offered by Skills and Training Advisory. Skills and Training Advisory is a service provided by Skills Future Singapore to guide Singaporeans and permanent residents in identifying skills and training needs to support their growth at various stages of their career, and also recommending suitable courses and programs that cater to their needs. Now, as an individual, here are some of the services that you can benefit from STA. Now, for more information for individual, you may want to screenshot of the QR code where you will enjoy a free 30 to 45 minutes of a one-to-one personalized consultation. And for organizations, you may want to email STA at the email address located on the right side of the slide. Great, thank you very much. For the next session, we'd like to invite you to participate in our feedback poll. Please give us your honest feedback so that we can further improve on our brown bag series. The feedback poll is popping up on your screen, so please take a few moments to share with us your observations. There are a total of 6 questions, so it would take a couple of seconds more before we wrap up the feedback poll. Thank you very much for your feedback and for joining us today. We hope you found today's session beneficial, and we would like to invite you to join us again this Friday, 14th of July, and the topic will be self-regulation learning from athletes, brought to you by Singapore University of Social Sciences. Please register early on our website, masterclass.sg. This Brown Bag series is proudly brought to you by Headhunt in partnership with Lifelong Learning Institute. With that, we'd like to wish you a wonderful day ahead and see you on Friday. Good night.